Christina Superstar has become a celebrity with a cult following. Her life in 1980s New York was documented by her friend and legendary videographer Nelson Sullivan. And his footage of Christina can be viewed at 5 9th Avenue Project YouTube channel, link below. Christina would become Club Kid King Michael Alig's very first It Girl. It would be through her association with Alig that she would earn the moniker Superstar, a reference to Andy Warhol's superstars, who were the inspiration for Michael Alig's career. Christina would also be portrayed on film posthumously in 2002 by Marilyn Manson in the film Party Monster. Stay tuned for the most complete and compelling documenting of the life of Christina. In this video, Retro Room's 19th upload on Christina, we will take a fascinating and tragic look at the life and times of an artist unappreciated in their time. This is Christina Superstars Biography. On May 19, 1954, Christina Superstar was born as Christopher Smith to parents Andrew Wilson Smith Jr. and Jane Ellerby Stewart in Mount Lebanon, Pennsylvania. Mount Lebanon had a population of 28,000, and in the 1950s, Mount Lebanon was the border between the suburbs and the country. It was a time when the milkman was a neighborhood staple, and no one locked their doors. Christina's father, Andrew, was a World War II veteran and an engineer with Westinghouse, providing financial security for Christina and her two siblings, Tom and Sarah. But financial security did not guarantee a happy childhood. Young Christina suffered from mental illness from a young age, receiving a schizophrenia diagnosis in her adolescent years. Christina never received further treatment after the diagnosis. She did receive, however, treatment in the form of insulin after she was diagnosed as being diabetic. Christina, who was being raised as Christopher, graduated high school, and after taking several years off of school, Chris enrolled in the Art Institute of Pittsburgh. While at the Art Institute, Chris made friends with Brian Martino, who was a fellow student. It would be through Martino that Chris would meet future love Lori Gursky. As graduation loomed and a new romance was beginning to blossom, the future was beginning to look bright for young Chris. But a storm was forming on the horizon for the sleepy town of Mount Lebanon, and its name was Christina Superstar. It was after Chris graduated from the University of Pittsburgh in 1983, the legend goes, that one day, according to Michael Alig, out of the blue, Chris began living as Christina, shocking his family, friends, and neighbors. The scandal was such that Christina was invited by her parents to leave Mount Lebanon. Her parents would pay her expenses, but she must go. Michael Alig would later say that Christina's wealthy parents, quote, simply paid her to leave. They paid for Christina's rent and all of her bills as long as she would simply stay away. Christina was now in exile with her girlfriend Lori and decided to head to New York City, where Christina's friend Martine had moved following graduation to attend Parsons. After moving to New York City, Christina and Lori moved into the legendary Chelsea Hotel. and Christina set out to create a new life for herself. She explored her passion for writing, painting, and at the same time began frequenting clubs in the meatpacking district, such as Hellfire Club and Club O. These were SM clubs famous in New York City. But Christina had ambitions and a drive to perform, and her early stage persona was influenced by Warhol superstar Nico and her performances with Velvet Underground. These would be the qualities that would catch the eye of a young pre-club kid, Michael Alig. After a few months, Christina had found an apartment, and she and Lori Gursky left the Chelsea Hotel and moved to 220 Park Avenue South, apartment 5A. Lori would later describe the apartment as a lovely area. As they settled into their new home, Christina began seeing a psychiatrist to get clearance for gender reassignment. She began taking hormones, but she hesitated on going any further during her time with Gursky. While living in her Park Avenue apartment, she made the acquaintance of Warhol actress Holly Woodlawn, who lived a mere block away, and in 1985, Christina attended Woodlawn's birthday party. But by this time, the relationship between Christina and Lori was on the rocks, due, at least in part, to Christina's volatile and, according to Gursky, abusive behavior. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss out on any future uploads from Retro Room. Lori had only one opportunity to meet Christina's brother Tom. And that opportunity came the only time that Christina ever went back to Mount Lebanon for her sister Sarah's funeral. Gursky said that Christina and Tom had virtually no relationship. Upon their return to New York, ultimately the relationship between Christina and Lori had ended, and Lori had moved out of the apartment that the two had shared. They would remain in contact over the next several years, although things between them would remain strained. Then, in 1985, Christina met and befriended legendary New York City videographer Nelson Sullivan. The footage that Sullivan recorded of Christina over the next 4 years would end up being the only surviving footage of her all of these decades later. Christina now had a quickly growing profile in New York City's nightlife, performing at Tunnel, Pyramid, and Danceteria. Her otherworldly way of speaking, her affected German accent, and her wild performances made Christina the subject of all manner of gossip and rumor. In 1985, Christina would make the acquaintance of a young Michael Alig, who was working at his first nightlife gig as a busboy at Tunnel nightclub. But even then, Alig had big plans. He was about to become a huge success. And in the tradition of Warhol, Christina would become Alig's first superstar. For a time, Christina and Michael Alig stars rose together. And as 1985 came to a close, the best days were still yet to come for Christina. The days to come would be the ones that would garner Christina a cult following some 30 years later. As a fascinating friend and riveting subject of Nelson Sullivan's camera. Christina had developed a close friendship with promoter Andy Anderson. Andy's nickname for Christina was Tina, a nickname that would spread throughout Anderson's inner circle. In fact, it was through Anderson that Christina would meet Tish Gervais, Warhol superstar Holly Woodlawn, and most notably, legendary videographer Nelson Sullivan. But Anderson wasn't the only promoter who was backing Christina. She had also caught the eye of a young Michael Alig. After persuading the owner of Tunnel, Alig's first party, a filthy mouth contest, was a huge success, and in short order, he crowned Christina as the It Girl of 1986, recognizing in Christina a valuable asset to Alig's future plans. Shortly afterwards, on February 1st, 1986, Christina and Andy Anderson arrived early at Danceteria before one of her shows. They were there to have their characters drawn by artist Ivan Jensen, who was still years away from having his paintings auctioned at Christie's. Also there, with Christina and Andy, was Lori Gursky and Nelson Sullivan. Later that night, Andy Anderson introduced Christina at her show at Danceteria and introduced her as his very good friend. Christina stepped up onto the stage. She reintroduced herself to the crowd as their It Girl for 1986, before promptly breaking the microphone. Then, on April 1st of that year, the well-connected Andy Anderson hosted a fabulous party at Nirvana. Christina was Anderson's guest at the party that boasted a fabulous view of Times Square. The party was also attended by Nelson Sullivan and Fenton Bailey, and can be viewed at 5 9th Avenue Project YouTube channel. Since Lori had moved out of Christina's apartment, Christina had been redecorating, creating her own private dungeon, because some of Christina's best performances were in her role as dominant, and she was in high demand, as she had many submissives. Lori Gursky would later describe this as Christina's real passion. On her nights out in the meatpacking district of New York City, there was no entourage and the camera was not invited. Although very quickly, Christina's apartment filled up with whips and crops and the other tools for her other secret life. As 1986 came to a close, Christina made the most of her last days as the It Girl. Then, as 86 gave way to 1987, Christina continued to be a popular performer with New York City audiences. 1987 was also the year that Christina and videographer Nelson Sullivan would forge a one-on-one friendship outside of Andy Anderson or Tish Gervais. The two would become very close by the end of that year. But not all of Nelson Sullivan's circle was happy about the new, closer relationship that Nelson was developing with Christina. Many of Sullivan's friends were more than a little resistant to new up-and-comers in the scene. Sullivan had faced pushback several times before. Michael Alig would later recount that several of Nelson Sullivan's friends objected one Thanksgiving when Nelson invited Michael Alig and subsequent It Girl Julie Jules over for dinner. They were not part of the wider clique, and ultimately Sullivan had to put his foot down to end the argument. The way Nelson's friends reacted to his friendship with Christina was similar to the way that they had reacted to his friendship with Michael Alig. In fact, by the end of 1987, Christina was merely being tolerated by the majority of Nelson Sullivan's inner circle. But even more, there was a growing disdain and even hostility for Christina by many of the other personalities and performers in the New York City nightlife scene. There was a feeling that her 15 minutes of fame was up, and she was now merely a bizarre spectacle to be mocked and ridiculed. And she was. These sentiments exploded on a December night at Tunnel. That would become a New York City nightlife legend. About that one night that a toxic blonde transsexual with a German accent completely lost her shit and started swinging a large knife around at the audience during one of her shows. It was Christina's 1987 birthday party. And the December event would become an urban legend in the New York City nightlife scene. But the reality of what went down that night would turn the legend on its ear and raise serious questions about the motivations of those in attendance that night. And it's all thanks to Nelson Sullivan, who recorded the events that took place that night. In one of his most revealing and prolific films, Christina's Birthday Party. In its almost 20-minute runtime, it reveals much about those who were there that night. And much about Christina Superstar herself. And the guest list was a who's who of New York nightlife, including recording artist Larry T., Wigstock creator Lady Bunny, drag performer Happy Face, Wigstock performer and visual artist Taboo, DJ Kioki, future Club Kid King Michael Alig, and of course, Nelson Sullivan. Christina was supposed to perform a pre-recorded musical number, but as she took her place on the stage, the other performers quickly made it clear that Christina's show would not be going on as planned. The other performers on stage began to interject and ask ridiculous questions, and trying to provoke Christina. When this proves unsuccessful, Christina is told that the tape she brought to perform to cannot be found. Unmoved, Christina Superstar stops cooperating and returns to her seat on the stage, while her fellow performers and some of the audience begin to taunt her and ask her further questions, taunting Christina to perform Jumping Jack Flash. This request for Christina to perform Jumping Jack Flash would become an ongoing joke to some, but would end up having very serious consequences later on. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss out on any future uploads from Retro Room. They brought out the birthday cake for Christina, which read, "Happy Birthday, Christian." As the show deteriorated, the crowd sings "Happy Birthday to You," and then Christina ends up having her birthday cake smashed into her face. In the full 20-minute video, there is no indication that Christina even had a knife or became violent with either the audience or her fellow performers. There was, however, a hammer present, which Christina did say was hers. The general reaction online to Nelson Sullivan's recording of Christina's birthday is both sadness and disgust. Here's what some of the top comments said from the videos taken on that night. Well, there you have it. I've been watching these videos for years, loving and adoring, and this is the first time I've seen them for what they are. What a vile way to treat someone on their birthday. She was treated badly and humiliated at this party. Even though Christina was off her face, she would have felt it. The shot of birthday cake dropped on the floor really gets me. R.I.P. Christina. They are ridiculing Christina. She is being tortured at her own birthday party with her friends. Shame on them all for doing this. Any of them still living should be embarrassed by their behavior that night. Although this night was not the first time Christina was mocked and tormented by her peers, this event would have a direct impact on the direction that Christina's life was about to take. By the end of 1987, Christina had become a local legend, and she had held her head high amongst all the drama and jealousy, plowing ahead with her newfound infamy. And as 1988 approached, some of her best days were still to come, but so too were the worst. It was the end of May in 1988, and Christina Superstar was at In the Dark studio for a photo shoot with photographer Liz Lizard. The article was about drag performers in New York City called Super Drag, and Christina was to be one of the profiled artists, alongside the likes of RuPaul, Lahoma Van Zant, Lady Bunny, and Sister Dimension. And Christina was as happy as she would ever be, dancing and laughing with Nelson Sullivan, who had arrived later to film the shoot. "I can't wait to see the tape," she told Sullivan, as they left the photo shoot and headed off to grab a bite. You can see all of Christina's videos at 5 9th Avenue Project YouTube channel, link below. But within days of the shoot, an event would take place that would permanently change Christina's life. In fact, by the time Christina's magazine feature was released in August of 1988, the incident would become the focus of her profile. Here is what the article Superdrag had to say about Christina, whose photo did not make it to print. "A lot of drag in the East Village is social terrorism," says Nelson, "and no one exemplifies this better than Christina. Christina's nonsensical, rhyming tagline, 'You'll know her once you've seen her,' makes perfect sense as it riddlesomely suggests, 'once you've seen her.' She's fairly tall, favors vaguely S&M flavored hot pants matched with slightly soiled halter tops, all the better to reveal her corpse-white skin and shoulder-length flaxen hair. She sways when she walks as if completely bombed, and who is to say she's not? Her heavy-lidded expression is perfectly complemented by a narcotic drawl that sounds like the cat back from the dead in Pet Sematary. The sum total makes Nico look like Sheena Easton. Her shows are as extraordinary as her look. On one occasion, she concluded an a cappella version of Jumping Jack Flash by attacking a member of the audience with her microphone stand, causing bloodshed and bodily harm. Christina's show ended with what must have been to her an epiphany as she was led from the stage of the pyramid and into custody by 2 policemen. During a photo shoot for some of the other performers featured in the article, RuPaul, Lahoma Van Zant, and Bubblicious, whose picture makes the article but whose profile does not, are having a discussion about the philosophy of drag with article's author, Fenton Bailey, and Nelson Sullivan. When Fenton asks them, "What about someone like Christina, say, who terrorizes people?" Bubblicious responded, quote, "I think Christina's brilliant because she is just beyond. Her thing doesn't even have anything to do with drag. She is just, I don't know what she is, I just love her though." As Fenton Bailey asks if any of them had seen the performance where Christina had attacked someone, Nelson Sullivan cuts the recording. When the recording resumes, Nelson Sullivan briskly changes the subject away from Christina. And all of this can be viewed at 5 9th Avenue Project YouTube channel, link below. After her arrest, Christina was charged and placed in jail pending bail. While in jail, Christina called former love Lori Gursky and complained about the treatment that she was receiving. She told Gursky that she was being actively denied her medication. Christina was worried about her upcoming court date, and she asked Lori to attend the proceedings with her. The level of concern that Christina had over her upcoming court date was so great that when the date came, Lori said Christina attended dressed as Christopher in what she called, quote, proper attire. For an unknown reason, the judge decided to delay the proceedings until a later date. But by the time the new court date would arrive, Christina would be no more. As 1988 came to a close, Christina would spend New Year's at the opening of Mars nightclub as the date of Nelson Sullivan. The first 6 months of 1989 would be the last of Christina Superstar's life. And as the year began, Christina was evicted from the apartment that she once shared with Lori. And in a full circle moment, she returned to the place where her life in New York City began, the legendary Chelsea Hotel. This time, to room 323. By this time, Christina and Nelson Sullivan were spending a lot of time together, and his footage of that time does much to validate Lori Gursky's claims of Christina's rapid physical decline during that time period. There were several other factors that may or may not have had varying degrees of effect on Christina's physical decline. Firstly, Christina told Nelson Sullivan on camera about an incident with a possible fellow resident of the Chelsea Hotel who threw acid at her, saying as soon as she felt it, she knew it was acid. Although Christina was still performing, albeit less frequently, her days as a dominatrix had come to an end. She was no longer physically able to continue and had fewer and fewer submissives. At the same time, her drug use had increased, and Christina was also becoming less and less coherent, and more frequently was mentioning what the voices in her head were telling her. During one screen test, Christina mentioned to Nelson Sullivan her struggles dealing with the loss of Andy Anderson. She told Sullivan she had been unable to cry for him as of yet. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss out on any future uploads from Retro Room. This brings us to the final days of Christina's life and the final 3 videos of her taken by Nelson Sullivan. A Visit with Christina, Part 1 and 2, and Nelson and Christina's Last Supper were all taken on the same night. It would be the last footage taken of Christina. Her left foot is covered in an odd sock and in flats, and she has a glove on her left hand which she uses to hold a cane to assist with her walking. When Nelson asked her about her foot, she described it as, quote, woman in a wheelchair look. It is also clear from the video that Christina's face seemed to be swollen and drooping on her left side. Her usually immaculately placed wig had the left side bang also drooping conspicuously on the left side, as if to conceal something. This evening would be the last time that Nelson would see Christina. Nelson arrives at Christina's apartment 323 at the Chelsea for a visit before the two head out to the Pyramid Club to see Jane County perform. Nelson and Christina's Last Supper picks up as Christina and Nelson are leaving the Pyramid Club to get something to eat. This video is even more significant based on timelines from Nelson Sullivan's work, Michael Alig, Lori Gursky, and others. It is the conclusion of this biography that this video was taken mere hours before Christina Superstar passed away in her room at the Chelsea Hotel. She was 35 years old. In a moment of foretelling common in Sullivan's work, When Christina is greeted by an acquaintance, Christina replies, quote, "Oh, thank you, I'm already." In the early hours of May 27, 1989, Christina Superstar passed away in room 323 of the Chelsea Hotel. Her remains were discovered there 5 days later. Christina had to be identified by her dental records. After being informed, Christina's parents traveled to New York. Her father, Andrew Smith, was in contact with both Lori Gursky and Nelson Sullivan. As Christina's final affairs were being attended to, Lori Gursky took and kept most of Christina's artwork except for one framed piece that was given to Nelson Sullivan. Christina's parents discussed the pending autopsy with both Gursky and Sullivan. For Lori's part, she revealed that Andrew Smith never divulged the results of the autopsy to her. Christina's parents had her remains cremated, then returned with them to Mount Lebanon. Christina's journey had finally come full circle. Over the following decades, exhibitions of Nelson Sullivan's work began popping up throughout North America and Europe, and audiences were fascinated by his dear friend Christina. And in 2002, a fictionalized Christina Superstar was portrayed in the film Party Monster by musician Marilyn Manson. But it would be in the YouTube era where Christina Superstar would reach a cult celebrity status, when Sullivan's videos of her was uploaded to the YouTube channel 5 9th Avenue Project. And today, people from all over can be captivated by, have sympathy for, and travel back in time through the lens of Nelson Sullivan's camera to experience the fascinating life of Christina Superstar. So guys, that is it for today, and that is also it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed the new Christina Superstars biography. Like always, leave me a comment below if you have anything to say. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you all again for my next upload.